The Mafia Boss invited his nerdy waitress to dinner as a joke. Then her arrival left him speechless. Why did he invite her as a joke? And what about her arrival could possibly leave a Mafia Boss speechless? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we step into today's story, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the powerful stories we share here. Thank you so much for watching, for staying with us, and for continuing to support this channel. Your time and support truly mean more than you know. And before we begin, leave a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We always love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's begin today's story. You know, Bennett, for someone who serves dinner every night, you look like you'd rather be reading the menu's footnotes. I heard the laughter before I looked up. That was usually how it worked at the Halcyon. Men with expensive watches laughed first, then checked whether everyone else had understood why. I balanced 3 espresso cups on a silver tray and walked toward table 9 without changing my expression. At 26, I had learned that being underestimated was sometimes cheaper than being noticed. My name was Laurel Bennett. 5 nights a week, I wore a white button-down shirt, black vest, sensible shoes, and glasses thick enough to inspire predictable jokes from customers who thought reading was an eccentric hobby. During breaks, I kept a paperback tucked beside the employee lockers. History, economics, occasionally mathematics when I wanted something relaxing. Apparently, this made me fascinating to men who spent $1,200 on dinner and still needed calculators to divide a check. But Table 9 was different. Table 9 belonged to Dorian Vale. Not officially, of course. The Halcyon didn't put names on tables. It didn't have to. Every Thursday at 8, that corner remained empty until Dorian arrived. Then the room seemed to reorganize itself around him. Conversations softened. Managers straightened their jackets. Even people who didn't recognize him seemed to sense that he was someone accustomed to being obeyed. He was 34, tall, dark-haired, always dressed in charcoal or black, and almost unnervingly quiet. I had served him for 7 months. He never raised his voice, never snapped his fingers, never flirted with me. Somehow, that made him more intimidating than the men who did all 3. Your espresso, Mr. Vale. I placed the cup beside his right hand. No sugar. His eyes lifted to mine. Gray. Steady. Observant. You remembered. You've ordered the same thing 28 Thursdays in a row. One of the men beside him laughed. Dorian didn't. His gaze shifted toward the paperback peeking from my apron pocket. What are you reading tonight? Nothing while I'm working. That wasn't my question. I hesitated. A biography of John Adams. Another laugh circled the table. See, a blond man said. I told you. Professor Bennett. I smiled politely. Would Professor Bennett like to explain this? The man pushed a folded sheet toward me. Numbers covered it. I should have walked away. Instead, one figure caught my eye. Then another. I frowned. Your projected return is wrong. Silence. The blond man blinked. Excuse me. I pointed without touching the paper. You applied the quarterly growth rate as though it were monthly. Unless 12% suddenly means something different at this table, your final number is overstated. Nobody laughed. Dorian slowly leaned back in his chair. For the first time in 7 months, his expression changed. Barely, but I saw it. Interest. I immediately regretted speaking. Dessert menus? I asked. Later, Dorian said. I turned away, but before I reached the service station, I heard the blond man murmur something about me being wasted carrying plates. Another voice answered with a joke I couldn't quite catch. Then came Dorian's low reply. Maybe we should invite her tomorrow night. Laughter followed. I kept walking. Then I heard the words that made my hand tighten around the tray. Come on, Vale. Invite the nerdy waitress. Let's see what happens when she has to sit at the table instead of serving it. I stopped. Not long enough for them to notice. Just long enough to understand. They thought I was the joke. And somewhere behind me, Dorian Vale said nothing. I finished the rest of my shift pretending I had heard nothing. That was another skill waiting tables taught you. Smile when someone complained about ice. Smile when a customer called you sweetheart instead of reading your name tag. Smile when 4 wealthy men decided your existence could become entertainment between espresso and dessert. By 11:30, The halcyon had emptied into the cold Manhattan night, leaving behind candle wax, folded napkins, and the faint smell of coffee. I was entering receipts at the service station when a shadow fell across the counter. Laurel. Dorian Vale had never used my first name before. I looked up. His friends were gone. His charcoal coat hung over one arm, and in his other hand was a cream-colored envelope. Mr. Vale. He placed it beside my calculator. Heavy paper, embossed lettering. The kind of invitation designed to remind ordinary people that elegance had a price. Dinner tomorrow. 8 o'clock. I stared at him. Is that a request? Something flickered behind his eyes. An invitation. Those are not always the same thing. He studied me for several seconds. Most people became uncomfortable when Dorian went silent. I had watched businessmen fill that silence with apologies, explanations, promises. I refused to help him. Finally, he said, there is a private dinner at the Whitmore Foundation Gala. I would like you to attend. Would you? His brow tightened. Would I what? Like me to attend? I slid the envelope toward him with one finger. Or would your friends? That landed. I saw it in the small movement of his jaw. You heard us. Restaurants have excellent acoustics when customers assume the staff is invisible. He glanced toward the empty dining room. It was a joke. I know. You do not seem offended. Would that make it funnier? His expression went still. For the first time, Dorian Vale looked like a man who had reached for a familiar door and discovered someone had moved the handle. No, he said. It would not. I should have ended it there. I should have handed back the invitation, collected my tips, taken the subway home, and forgotten him. Instead, I looked at the envelope again. What exactly is funny about me having dinner with you? That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Silence again. This time it belonged to me. Dorian glanced at my glasses, my uniform, the paperback beside the register. He did not need to answer. His eyes had already done it. I nodded once. Understood. Laurel. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock. His surprise was immediate. You are coming? You invited me. I thought you were about to refuse. I picked up the envelope and slipped it into my bag. That would make this too easy for you. He almost smiled. Almost. There is a dress code. I can read, Mr. Vale. I know. Something about the way he said it irritated me more than the joke itself. I put on my coat and walked toward the employee exit. Laurel. I stopped without turning. Why say yes? I looked back at the man everyone else seemed afraid to disappoint. Because I want to know something. What? Whether you are still interesting when nobody is serving you. His face changed. The confidence remained, but the amusement disappeared. I pushed open the door. Cold air swept across my cheeks. Tomorrow night, I said, you can find out. Then I left Dorian Vale standing alone beside a table he had always assumed belonged to him. I did not sleep much that night. Not because of Dorian Vale. At least, that was what I told myself while standing in my tiny kitchen at 1:14 in the morning, eating leftover soup and staring at the cream-colored invitation on my counter. The Whitmore Foundation Gala. Black tie. Friday, 8 o'clock. Beneath the embossed address was a handwritten note in dark ink. Guest of Dorian Vale. I almost laughed. Yesterday, I had been Professor Bennett, the waitress with the thick glasses and paperback in her pocket. Tomorrow I would apparently be his guest. The strange part was that I knew the Whitmore, better than Dorian could possibly imagine. I opened the bottom drawer beneath my kitchen counter and pulled out a battered cardboard box I had not touched in nearly 3 years. Inside were pieces of a life I rarely allowed myself to remember. A university identification card, debate medals, a photograph of my father standing beside me beneath stone columns on graduation weekend, back when graduation had still seemed inevitable. And underneath everything, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was a navy folder stamped with the crest of Hawthorne University. My name was printed across the front. Laurel and Bennett. Economics Honors Program. I ran my thumb across the letters. For years earlier, I had known rooms like the Whitmore. I had known which fork to use, how to survive donor dinners, how to discuss interest rates without putting anyone to sleep. My father, Graham Bennett, had spent 25 years advising companies on financial risk. He believed numbers told the truth if you were patient enough to listen. Then one disastrous year changed everything. His firm collapsed beneath accusations, lawsuits, and debts that seemed to multiply every week. By spring, our house was gone. By summer, I had withdrawn from Hawthorne with 2 semesters remaining. People assumed I had failed. I let them. Failure was easier to explain than watching your family fall apart in public. I closed the folder. That version of Laurel belonged to another life. The woman in my mirror now wore a faded college sweatshirt and glasses held together at one hinge by a tiny repair screw. I did not need to resurrect the old me for Dorian Vale. That would mean dressing for revenge, and revenge was still a kind of performance. The next afternoon, I worked the lunch shift as usual. Dorian did not appear. His blonde friend did. He sat near the bar with 2 men I recognized from table 9. When I delivered their coffee, he gave me a smile that arrived half a second too slowly. "Big night tonight, Professor? Is it? You are really going?" I set down his cup. "You sound disappointed." Surprised. His eyes traveled over my uniform and stopped at my glasses. The Whitmore can be intimidating. So can the lunch rush. One of the men covered a laugh. The blonde man leaned back. "Just trying to help. Then leave 20%. I walked away before he could answer. At 6:15, I clocked out. At 6:40, I stood in my apartment staring at 2 dresses hanging from my closet door. One was new, safe, forgettable. The other was midnight blue, simple and beautifully cut, untouched for years. My father had bought it before everything disappeared. I reached for the blue one. Not because Dorian expected transformation. Not because his friends expected failure. Because it was mine. At 7:38, I removed my glasses, placed them carefully beside the invitation, and looked at my reflection. Nothing magical happened. I was still Laurel Bennett. That was the point. At 7:52, my cab turned onto Fifth Avenue, and the Whitmore came into view beneath hundreds of warm golden lights. I felt my old world waiting behind those doors. Then I saw Dorian Vale standing at the top of the steps, checking his watch. He thought he knew who was coming. In 8 minutes, he was going to discover how little he knew about me. The cab stopped beneath the Whitmore awning at exactly 8 o'clock, and for 3 seconds I stayed where I was. Through the window, I could see Dorian waiting beneath the gold light, one hand in his coat pocket, his expression carrying the calm impatience of a man who believed the evening had already been written. Then the doorman opened my door. Cold Manhattan air swept inside. I stepped out. Dorian looked toward me and stopped. Completely. I had seen that man silence rooms without speaking. Now he seemed unable to find a single word for himself. His eyes moved from my midnight blue dress to my face, then back to my eyes. Without my glasses, there was nothing between us. "Good evening, Mr. Vale." He blinked. "Laurel, you remembered." "I remember everything." "That sounds exhausting." The corner of his mouth moved, but his attention never left me. "You look," he stopped again. I waited. "Different," I offered. "No," his answer came quietly. "That is the problem." I raised an eyebrow. "Problem?" I thought I knew what I was looking at. For once, there was no arrogance in his voice. Only surprise. Most people do. I walked past him toward the entrance. He caught up beside me. Inside, the Whitmore glowed with chandeliers, polished marble, and conversations softened by money. A string quartet played near the staircase. Servers moved between guests carrying champagne. I recognized the rhythm instantly. Wealth had its own choreography. Dorian watched me accept my coat check ticket, greet the hostess, and move through the lobby without hesitation. "You have been here before." It was not a question. "Years ago." "For what?" "Dinner." "You are enjoying this." "A little." We entered the private dining room. His blonde friend was already seated with several guests. The smile on his face disappeared when he saw me. That alone almost made the cab fare worthwhile. "Professor Bennett," he said. "You made it." Apparently. Dorian pulled out the chair beside his own. I was about to sit when an older gentleman across the table rose slowly. His silver eyebrows lifted. Laurel Bennett. My breath caught. I knew that voice. Mr. Whitaker. Samuel Whitaker had taught economic policy at Hawthorne for 31 years. He had also written one of the recommendation letters I never got to use. He came around the table, smiling with genuine disbelief. "Good heavens. Where have you been?" Suddenly, every face turned toward me. including Dorian's. Working, I said. Samuel laughed softly. Still giving impossible answers? Only when people ask easy questions. This young woman, Samuel announced to the table, once corrected my statistical model in front of 80 students. I felt heat rise into my cheeks. There were 76. See, Samuel said. She remembers. The blond man stared at me. Dorian said nothing. Samuel's smile softened. We missed you after you left Hawthorne. The room changed. I could feel the question forming around the table. Why had a Hawthorne honors student become a waitress? I did not owe them that answer. Life changed, I said simply. Samuel understood enough not to push. Dorian pulled out the chair again, but something in me resisted the symbolism of it. The seat beside him felt like part of the joke, like a place chosen for me before I arrived. So I smiled, walked around the table, and took the empty chair at the far end. Dorian remained standing for half a second. Then he sat down slowly. Dinner began, and for the first time since I had known him, Dorian Vale was not the person everyone was watching. He was watching me. By the time the first course arrived, I understood something Dorian had probably never intended me to discover. He hated not knowing. From the far end of the table, I could feel his attention following every conversation I entered, every question I answered, every small moment that contradicted whatever picture he had built of me at the Halcyon. Samuel Whitaker asked what I had been reading lately. I told him about the Adams biography in my apron pocket. A woman from a nonprofit foundation asked whether I still followed economic policy. Enough to know when people confuse confidence with accuracy, I said. Samuel laughed. Dorian's blonde friend did not. His name, I finally learned, was Preston Hale. He spent most of the appetizer trying to recover from the shock of discovering that I could identify a bond yield without asking permission first. So you actually studied economics? Preston asked. For several years. At Hawthorne? Yes. And now you wait tables. There it was. Not curiosity. A measurement. I set down my water glass. Now I work at a restaurant. That is what I said. No. You said it like the second fact erased the first. Samuel lowered his eyes, hiding a smile. Across the table, Dorian leaned back. Preston cleared his throat. I did not mean anything by it. People usually say that after meaning something by it. The woman beside me laughed softly, and the conversation moved on. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. I knew this room. I knew the polished questions that were really examinations. Where did you study? Who was your family? What did you do now? Every answer placed you somewhere on an invisible ladder. Years ago, I had climbed it without noticing. Losing everything had taught me how clearly people could see the ladder while remaining blind to the person standing on it. The main course arrived. A discussion began about a redevelopment project in Queens. Someone praised the projected returns. Someone else called displacement an unfortunate necessity. I stayed quiet until Samuel asked, "What do you think, Laurel?" About the returns? About the project. I glanced around the table. I think spreadsheets are very clean places to put messy consequences. The room quieted. Meaning? Dorian asked. It was the first question he had directed at me since we sat down. Meaning a building can be profitable and still cost people something that never appears in the final column. His gaze sharpened. You believe profit is wrong? I believe pretending it is the only number that matters is lazy. Preston gave a short laugh. That sounds idealistic. No. Idealism is assuming people disappear because your spreadsheet stops mentioning them. Samuel murmured, "There she is." I looked down at my plate. For a moment, Hawthorne felt painfully close. Lecture halls. My father waiting outside with coffee. A future that once seemed guaranteed. Then Dorian said, "Why did you leave?" The question landed too close. Dorian, Samuel warned gently. I met Dorian's eyes. Because life changed. That is what you said earlier. It is still the answer. He held my gaze, then nodded. No pressure. No command. Strangely, that restraint mattered. Dessert had just been served when a woman entered the room wearing a silver evening gown and the expression of someone accustomed to being welcomed. She was elegant, perhaps 32, with pale blonde hair swept neatly back. Dorian stood. So did Preston. "Celeste," Dorian said. Her eyes found him first. Then they traveled down the table until they reached me. She smiled. Beautifully. Coldly. So, she said, removing her gloves. This must be the waitress everyone has been talking about. The room went silent. I looked at Dorian. For the first time that evening, he did not look amused. He looked ashamed. Celeste did not wait for an introduction. She crossed the room as though every chair had been arranged for her arrival, kissed the air beside Preston's cheek, greeted Samuel with practiced warmth, then stopped near Dorian. You could have told me tonight was going to be interesting. Dorian's expression remained unreadable. I was not aware you were coming. Preston mentioned dinner. Preston suddenly became fascinated by his dessert. I understood immediately. Celeste had not wandered in by accident. Someone had invited an audience. Her gaze returned to me. Laurel, is it? That is right. How charming. She took the empty chair near Dorian without asking. I have heard so much about you. That makes one of us. Samuel coughed into his napkin. Celeste smiled. You work at Dorian's restaurant? Dorian does not own the Halcyon. Not technically. I glanced at him. Dorian gave the smallest shake of his head, as if telling me that explanation could wait. Celeste continued. Preston said you were very clever. Preston has had an educational evening. Preston shifted in his chair. Come on, Laurel. Nobody meant any harm. I did not say anyone did. That was the problem with people like Preston. They became nervous when you refused to become angry on schedule. Celeste lifted her wine glass. I admire confidence, especially when it comes from unexpected places. There it was again, the invisible ladder. She wanted me to climb onto the lowest rung so she could compliment me for standing there gracefully. Unexpected to whom? I asked. Her smile tightened. Before she answered, Samuel asked me about Hawthorne again, and the conversation shifted. For the next 20 minutes, Celeste tested me with the subtle persistence of someone searching for a locked door. Art, travel, education, finance. She mentioned summers in France. I told her I had never been. She looked pleased until I asked what she thought of the economic reforms she had brought up. She changed subjects. I did not embarrass her. I did not need to. Dorian noticed. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. He was no longer watching me like an experiment. He was listening, really listening. When I spoke, his attention settled completely. When someone interrupted, his eyes hardened slightly. And when Preston made another joke about Professor Bennett, Dorian said, Enough. One word. Quiet. Final. Preston stopped smiling. I looked at Dorian. I can defend myself. I know. Then let me. Something passed between us. Not affection. Not yet. Respect, perhaps. Fragile and inconvenient. Celeste saw it too. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. A server approached to clear dessert plates. Celeste looked at him, then at me. Actually, perhaps Laurel could help us with the wine. She probably knows exactly how Dorian likes it served. The room became painfully still. The server froze. Preston stared at the table. Samuel's face hardened. Dorian pushed his chair back. Celeste. His voice was colder than I had ever heard it. I raised one hand. No, Dorian looked at me. Laurel, please. I stood slowly, smoothing the skirt of my dress. Celeste's smile returned because she thought I was obeying. I walked toward the wine bottle. Then I stopped beside it and looked directly at her. You are right about one thing. I do know how to serve this table. Her smile widened. Wonderful. But tonight, I was invited to sit at it. Her smile disappeared. I turned toward Dorian. And I think that distinction is making some people uncomfortable. Nobody spoke. I looked around the table, at the crystal, the silver, the faces waiting for me to shrink. I spend 5 nights a week serving people. There is dignity in that work. The embarrassing thing is not carrying someone else's plate. I looked at Celeste. It is needing someone beneath you before you can feel important. Silence. Deep, complete silence. Then I picked up my evening bag. Dorian stood. Where are you going? Home. Because of her? I met his eyes. No, Dorian. For the first time, I used his name without thinking. Because I finally understand the joke. His face changed. Laurel, wait. I shook my head. You invited me here to find out whether I could survive your world. I glanced once around the glittering room. Maybe you should start wondering whether your world survives being seen clearly. Then I walked toward the door, and this time nobody laughed. The elevator doors closed behind me before Dorian could reach them. I watched his reflection disappear between two panels of polished brass, and only then did I realize my hands were shaking. Not from embarrassment, from anger. Quiet anger was always the worst kind because it followed you home. The Whitmore lobby felt colder than it had an hour earlier. I collected my coat, stepped beneath the awning, and discovered that Manhattan had started raining. Of course it had. I almost laughed. My cab application showed a 23-minute wait, so I started walking toward Fifth Avenue. Laurel. I knew the voice before I turned. Dorian came through the revolving doors without his coat, ignoring the rain settling across his shoulders. You should go back inside. I need to explain. No. You want to explain? There is a difference. He stopped several feet away. For once, he did not close the distance simply because he could. You were right. That surprised me enough to make me look at him. About what? The joke. His voice was low. It was mine before it became theirs. Rain tapped against the awning above us. Preston suggested the bet. I accepted because I thought it was harmless. Harmless to whom? He looked away. That was answer enough. I did not think about how it would feel to you. Exactly. I am not used to being told I am wrong. That sounds expensive. A breath escaped him that might have been a laugh on another night. Usually. I folded my arms against the cold. You thought I would arrive nervous. You thought I would say the wrong thing, use the wrong fork, maybe stare at the chandeliers like I had never seen electricity. His jaw tightened. I deserve that. I am not trying to punish you. That somehow makes it worse. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Cars hissed over wet pavement. Somewhere down the block, a horn sounded. Dorian Vale, the man who could make an entire restaurant rearrange itself around him, stood in the rain waiting for a waitress to decide whether he deserved another sentence. Why did you leave Hawthorne? He asked finally. My expression changed. Do not. I am asking, not investigating. Then learn that some questions are still none of your business. He nodded immediately. No argument. That unsettled me more than pressure would have. All right. My cab application buzzed. Driver arriving in 4 minutes. Dorian glanced toward the street. Let me take you home. No, Laurel, it is raining. New York has survived rain before. So have I. Congratulations. This time he actually smiled, but it disappeared quickly. What can I do? I looked at him. About tonight. About what I did. The obvious answers were waiting. Flowers. Money. A grand apology wrapped in expensive paper. Men like Dorian understood gestures because gestures could be purchased. I wanted something harder. Nothing tonight. His brow furrowed. Nothing. Go back upstairs. And do what? Sit at that table. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Listen to the way your friends talk. When there is nobody beneath them, they need to impress. Listen to what they laugh at. Listen to what you have been laughing at with them. His face became very still. Then decide whether you like the man they expect you to be. My cab pulled toward the curb. I opened the rear door. Laurel. I looked back. I am sorry. There was no charm in it. No authority. Just 4 quiet words. I believed he meant them. That did not mean I owed him forgiveness. Good night, Dorian. I got into the cab. As we pulled away, I glanced through the rain-streaked window. He was still standing beneath the awning, watching the car disappear. The next morning, I arrived at the Halcyon at 10:45 expecting gossip. Instead, my manager met me before I reached the employee lockers. His face looked pale. Laurel, we need to talk. My stomach tightened. About last night. He avoided my eyes. A complaint came in this morning. I went still. From whom? He swallowed. Someone with enough influence that the owners are taking it seriously. And suddenly I understood. The dinner was over. The joke was not. My manager led me into the small office behind the kitchen and closed the door. His name was Martin Keller, and in 2 years of working for him, I had never seen him struggle this hard to make eye contact. The complaint says you behaved inappropriately toward a guest at a private event connected to several of our clients. I stared at him. I attended that event off the clock. I know. I was invited. I know that too. Then why are we having this conversation? Martin rubbed his forehead. Because Celeste Rose sits on the hospitality board for the group that owns this restaurant. There it was. Not truth. Leverage. What exactly does she claim I did? Embarrassed her publicly. Used your position here to gain access to private guests. Created an uncomfortable situation. I almost smiled at the absurdity. And you believe her? Laurel, what I believe is not the only issue. It should be. He looked ashamed. The owners want you suspended while they review it. The words landed quietly. Suspended. Rent was due in 9 days. My subway card needed refilling. Life did not become less expensive because wealthy people disliked being contradicted. I stood. Then give me the complaint in writing. Martin blinked. What? And the suspension? In writing. Include the policy I supposedly violated and confirm that the event happened outside working hours. Laurel, maybe we can keep this informal. No, my voice stayed calm. If they want to use procedure against me, we are going to use all of it. Something changed in his face. Respect, perhaps, or relief that I was not asking him to rescue me. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the halcyon carrying my apron in my bag. I had reached the corner when a black sedan stopped at the curb. I recognized it immediately. The rear door opened, and Dorian stepped out. No, I said before he could speak. He looked at my bag. What happened? You do not know? If I knew, I would not be asking. I believed him. That made me angrier at the situation, not at him. Celeste filed a complaint. I am suspended. Dorian's expression went cold. I will handle it. There. There what? That. I pointed at him. Those 3 words. His brow tightened. You could lose your job. Then I will defend my job. Laurel, Celeste is doing this because of me. Probably. So let me fix it. How? He did not answer quickly enough. I already knew. 1 telephone call. 1 favor. 1 invisible pressure applied somewhere above Martin's head. By lunchtime, my suspension would disappear, and everyone would understand that I had kept my job because Dorian Vale permitted it. No, I said. You asked last night what you could do differently. Start here. He stared at me. You want me to do nothing? I want you to stop confusing power with help. That hit harder than I expected. His face changed. Then tell me what help looks like. I pulled the written notice from my bag. Evidence. The dinner had guests. The Whitmore has staff. Celeste made the comment in front of witnesses. If someone asks what happened, tell the truth. No threats. No favors. No calls to owners. Dorian took the paper, read it once, and handed it back. All right. I searched his face. That easy. No, a faint, humorless smile appeared. I am discovering that doing things your way is rarely easy. My phone rang. Martin. I answered. Laurel, you need to come back. Why? His voice sounded stunned. Samuel Whitaker called the owners himself. 2 other guests submitted statements. They want to withdraw the suspension pending a formal review. I looked at Dorian. He had not touched his phone. I will be there in 5 minutes. I hung up. Dorian tilted his head. Good news. Maybe. I started toward the restaurant, then stopped. You really did nothing? Not nothing. What did you do? His eyes held mine. I listened. For the first time, that answer was enough. By noon, I was back on the floor wearing my apron as if the morning had never happened. That was the strange thing about ordinary life. Your job could nearly disappear before lunch, and by 12:15 someone was still asking whether the soup contained dairy. The owners withdrew my suspension after reviewing statements from Samuel Whitaker and 2 other guests. Celeste's complaint remained on file, but so did my response. For me, that mattered. Dorian kept his word. No telephone calls. No favors. No invisible hand reaching down to rearrange the world for me. He did not even come inside. I watched his black sedan disappear through the front windows while I refilled table 4's coffee. 3 days passed before I saw him again. Thursday, 8 o'clock, table 9. Except this time Dorian came alone. No Preston, no entourage. Just a charcoal suit, an unreadable expression, and the same espresso he had ordered 29 Thursdays before. No sugar, I said, setting it down. You remembered. 30 Thursdays now. He looked at the empty chair across from him. Do you have 5 minutes? I am working. When you are finished. I should have said no. Instead, at 10:40, after my last table left, I found him still sitting there. A folder rested beside his untouched water glass. If that is money, I am leaving. It is not. I sat across from him. He opened the folder and slid a photocopied document toward me. At the top was a name I had spent years trying not to think about. Bennett Strategic Advisory. My father's firm. My breathing changed. Where did you get this? Public records. Why were you looking? Because Samuel mentioned your father after you left the Whitmore. Anger rose immediately. I told you not to investigate me. You did. Then what do you call this? Dorian did not defend himself. A mistake. I pushed the paper back. Another one? Yes. The simplicity stopped me. He looked down at the folder. But I found something before I stopped. I hated that part of me wanted to know. What? Your father's firm did not collapse only because of bad investments. My fingers went cold. I know what happened. Do you? His voice was careful. A holding company acquired several of his clients' distressed positions weeks before the accusations became public. They profited when his firm failed. I stared at him. What holding company? Dorian was silent too long. That frightened me more than an answer would have. Vale Meridian Group. The restaurant noise seemed to recede. Plates. Glasses. Conversation. All of it became distant. Your company? A company connected to my organization. Connected how? It operated under an investment network my family controlled at the time. I stood so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. You knew? No, your name is on it. My name is on hundreds of entities I inherited when my uncle died. That does not excuse what happened. My father lost everything. The words came out quieter than I expected. Our house. His reputation. My tuition. Everything. Dorian stood, but he stayed on his side of the table. I know. No. You know numbers on paper. My throat tightened. I know what it sounded like when my father stopped answering the telephone because every call made him feel ashamed. Dorian's face changed. Laurel, I am sorry. Do not apologize for something you say you did not know about. Then I will apologize for benefiting from a system I never questioned. That silenced me. He closed the folder. I am going to find out exactly what happened. Why? Because you were right. About what? His eyes met mine. Some profits cost people something that never appears in the final column. I looked at him for a long moment. And if you find out your own people caused it? Dorian's expression became very still. Then I stopped protecting the wrong thing. I spent the next 4 days telling myself Dorian Vale's investigation had nothing to do with me. Then Monday morning, an envelope appeared beneath my apartment door. No return address. No expensive stationery. Just my name and a handwritten note inside. I found the first answer. If you want the rest, come to my office at 6. Dorian. I almost threw it away. At 5:58, I stepped into a glass tower on Park Avenue instead. Dorian's office occupied the 37th floor, but it looked less like a throne room than I expected. Dark wood. Bookshelves. Manhattan spread beyond the windows in cold blue light. Dorian stood behind a conference table covered with documents. You came. Do not sound so surprised. I am learning not to assume anything about you. Progress. He pulled out a chair, but did not tell me to sit. I did anyway. What did you find? He placed 3 files in front of me. Vale Meridian purchased distressed positions connected to your father's clients 11 days before Bennett Strategic Advisory came under formal review. You told me that already. I did not know who authorized it. My stomach tightened. Now you do. Victor Sloan. The name meant nothing to me. Dorian continued. He managed financial operations for my uncle. When I inherited the organization, Victor stayed. He still oversees several companies. So your trusted executive profited from my father's collapse. It is worse than that. Dorian opened another file. There were internal projections predicting the collapse before the information should have been available. I stared at the dates. My father had always insisted someone knew. I had thought grief had turned suspicion into obsession. Can you prove where the information came from? Not yet. I looked up. Then this changes nothing. It changes what I do next. Dorian walked toward the window. I can remove Victor tonight. Shut down every operation he controls. And then he is gone. And the truth goes with him. Dorian turned. What would you have me do? The question surprised me. Not because he asked it. Because he seemed to mean it. Document everything. Independent audit. Preserve the records. If laws were broken, send the evidence to people whose job is to deal with that. His expression tightened slightly. You make that sound simple. No. I make it sound accountable. Silence filled the office. There is another option, he said. I knew from his tone I was not going to like it. He opened a drawer and placed a folder in front of me. Inside was a check, a letter offering to pay the remaining obligations connected to my father, and another document covering my tuition if I returned to Hawthorne. I stared at the pages. What is this? A beginning. I closed the folder. No, Laurel, listen. I said no. Your father lost years because of people connected to me. You left school. You are working double shifts. And you think a check makes the numbers balance? I think restitution matters. Restitution without truth is just expensive silence. He went still. I pushed the folder back across the table. You still think money is the same thing as making something right. That is not fair. Neither was what happened to my family. His eyes dropped. I regretted the sharpness, but not the truth. I do not want your money, Dorian. I want you to stop treating every problem like something you can purchase, remove, or control. Then what do you want from me? I stood. Nothing. His face hardened with frustration. Nothing again. Yes. Because if you only do the right thing when I am standing here watching you, then you are not changing. You are performing. That landed between us harder than anything I had said before. I picked up my coat. At the door, I looked back. Dorian had not moved. The check remained untouched between us. Find the truth, I said. Not for me. Not for my father. Because it is the truth. Then I left. 3 days later, Samuel Whitaker called me during my lunch break. Laurel, he said, sounding stunned. Have you seen the financial news? My heart skipped. No, he exhaled slowly. Vale Meridian just requested an independent forensic audit of its own companies. I closed my eyes. Dorian. Yes. Samuel paused. And according to the announcement, he voluntarily stepped away from oversight of the investigation. For the first time, Dorian Vale had chosen to give up control when keeping it would have been easier. The announcement should have made me feel relieved. Instead, it made me nervous. Men like Dorian Vale did not surrender control without consequences, and by Friday afternoon, those consequences had started appearing. Financial reporters gathered outside Vale Meridian. Investors demanded answers. Commentators who had praised Dorian's discipline a week earlier suddenly questioned his judgment. I watched the coverage from the break room at the Halcyon while eating half a turkey sandwich. Martin turned down the television. That your friend? He is not my friend. Martin gave me a look. He has spent 30 Thursdays drinking espresso in my restaurant. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Please never become a detective. My telephone buzzed before he could answer. Samuel. I stepped into the hallway. They found something, he said. My stomach tightened. What? The auditors traced internal communications. Victor Sloan had access to confidential information concerning several firms before their financial problems became public. Your father's company was one of them. I leaned against the wall. For years, my father had carried the humiliation of believing he had simply failed. Now one sentence had shifted the ground beneath that memory. Does Dorian know? He received the preliminary findings this morning. And Samuel paused. Victor resigned from every Vale-affiliated company 2 hours later. Dorian turned the records over to outside counsel and regulators. I closed my eyes. He had done exactly what I asked. No disappearing files. No quiet arrangement. No private punishment. Truth first. Thank you for telling me. When I returned to the dining room, table 9 was empty. Thursday had passed without Dorian. So had Friday. On Saturday evening, Preston Hale arrived alone. I nearly asked another server to take him, but he requested me specifically. Coffee, he said. Black. I set it down. Anything else? You really did it. Did what? Changed him. I stared at him. I did not change anyone. Preston gave a humorless laugh. You have no idea what this audit is costing him. Then perhaps the things being audited were costing other people more. His expression tightened. Victor has been with Dorian's family for 20 years. My father was my family for 26. Preston looked away. Dorian is dismantling half the structure his uncle left him. That is his decision. Because of you. No, I leaned slightly closer. Do not give me credit for another adult developing a conscience. Preston blinked. You really are impossible. 20%, remember? I walked away. At closing time, I found Dorian outside beneath the awning. No sedan waited at the curb. No driver. He looked tired. Not dramatic. Just human. You missed Thursday, I said. You counted. Occupational habit. His faint smile disappeared. The auditors confirmed what happened to your father. Samuel told me. There may be enough evidence to clear parts of his professional record. My breath caught. Do not promise that. I am not. He had learned. That almost hurt more than if he had not. Why are you here? I asked. To tell you something before you hear it from someone else. Rain had begun to mist beneath the streetlights. Victor was not acting entirely alone. My stomach tightened. Who else? Dorian looked toward the traffic. My uncle approved the strategy. Several senior executives knew. Some still work for me. What are you going to do? Close the companies built around those practices. Cooperate with the investigation. Remove anyone who participated. That could damage everything you inherited. I know. Your money. Your influence. I know. I searched his face. Then why? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. Because I spent years believing power meant protecting what belonged to me. His eyes met mine. You made me understand that sometimes power means deciding what should no longer belong to you. I had no clever answer. For once, neither did he. Then his telephone rang. He looked at the screen, and every trace of softness vanished. What happened? I asked. He answered the call, listened, then closed his eyes. The audit found another company. And he looked at me. It is still operating. Dorian ended the call and stood beneath the halcyon awning without speaking. The rain had strengthened, tapping against the canvas above us in a steady rhythm. What company? I asked. Northbridge Capital Services. What does it do? On paper, financial consulting and commercial restructuring. His mouth tightened. In practice, the auditors believe it has been using the same strategy Victor used years ago. Acquire distressed positions early. Exploit private information. Profit from the collapse. Still, as of this morning, I watched his face carefully. A month ago, I imagined Dorian would have solved a problem like this with one private conversation and enough pressure to make everyone disappear from the company directory by breakfast. Now he took out his telephone and called the audit firm. Preserve every record, he said. No deletions. No transfers. Nobody touches anything until outside counsel reviews it. He listened. Yes, everything. When he hung up, I realized I had been holding my breath. You already knew what to do. I knew what you would tell me to do. That is not the same thing. No, his eyes met mine. This time I chose it before you said anything. That mattered. More than I wanted it to. Over the next 2 weeks, Dorian became a familiar face on financial news without once speaking to a camera. Vale Meridian announced the closure of Northbridge, suspended executives named in the audit, and transferred its records for independent review. Several profitable contracts disappeared overnight. Newspapers called it a crisis. Analysts called it self-destruction. Preston called me on a Tuesday afternoon and called it madness. Dorian called it necessary. I knew because he finally returned to the halcyon the following Thursday. Alone again. He sat at table 9 with no folder, no entourage, no expensive gesture waiting beside his coffee. How bad? I asked after my shift ended. Financially, yes. Bad. Do you regret it? He looked into his espresso. Ask me again when I stop calculating what I lost. I smiled despite myself. That might be the most honest thing you have ever said. I am trying something new. I sat across from him. Samuel called. Dorian looked up. About your father? I nodded. The auditors had uncovered documents showing that Graham Bennett had warned clients about irregularities before his firm collapsed. Those warnings had been buried when the accusations began. They did not erase every mistake my father had made, but they changed the story. He had not been foolish. He had not imagined the manipulation. For years, shame had spoken louder than evidence. Now evidence was finally speaking back. I wish he could see it, I said. Dorian did not offer comfort too quickly. He had learned that too. So do I. I looked toward the empty restaurant. Chairs rested upside down on tables. The chandeliers had been dimmed. Without customers, the halcyon looked smaller, almost ordinary. You know what is strange? I said. The first night you invited me out, I thought the worst thing about you was that you underestimated me. Reasonable conclusion. It was not. He raised an eyebrow. The worst thing was that you never questioned the world that taught you to. Dorian absorbed that quietly. And now you are questioning it. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. Do not get comfortable. He smiled. Then he reached inside his jacket, and my expression hardened automatically. If that is another check, I am leaving. It is not. He placed a small folded paper on the table. Not embossed. Not expensive. Just plain white paper. I opened it. Hawthorne University had formally invited me to meet with an academic advisor regarding completion of my remaining degree requirements. I looked up sharply. Did you arrange this? No, Dorian. Samuel did. I only knew because he asked whether I thought you would throw the letter away. My throat tightened. What did you tell him? Dorian leaned back. I told him Laurel Bennett does exactly what Laurel Bennett decides to do. I looked at the letter again. For years, returning had felt impossible. Now the door was open. Dorian did not tell me to walk through it. He simply sat there and let the choice belong to me. I kept Samuel's letter on my kitchen counter for 11 days before I answered it. Not because I did not want to return to Hawthorne. Because wanting something again was frightening when you had already learned how quickly a future could disappear. On the 12th morning, I called the university. 3 weeks later, I walked beneath the stone archway I had once believed I would never see again. Samuel met me outside the economics building with 2 coffees and no dramatic speech. I appreciated him for that. Hawthorne accepted most of my previous credits. I would need 2 semesters, several updated courses, and more work than I wanted to think about. I said yes before fear could answer for me. I kept working at the Halcyon, but only 3 nights a week. Dorian never offered to pay my tuition again. He never offered me a job. He never tried to make the difficult parts disappear. Somehow, that became the clearest proof that he had finally learned who I was. Winter softened into spring. The investigation into Vale Meridian continued. Several former executives left. Some companies closed. Others were rebuilt under independent oversight. Dorian lost money. He lost allies. He lost invitations from people who had once laughed loudly at everything he said. Preston stopped appearing at Table 9. Celeste never returned to the Halcyon. Dorian did. Every Thursday at 8. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with business associates who suddenly seemed much more careful about how they spoke to servers. He ordered espresso. No sugar. And he never once asked me for anything. Then, on a rainy Thursday in April, I finished my shift and found Table 9 empty. For the first time in months, Dorian was sitting at a small table near the front window instead. No private corner. No reserved sign. No invisible boundary around him. Just Dorian, 2 cups of coffee, and the paperback biography of John Adams I had left behind weeks earlier. I walked over. You stole my book. Borrowed. Without asking. I am still working on my character. I smiled. Slowly. Painfully. I looked at the second cup. What is this? Coffee. I can see that. Then Hawthorne is clearly paying off. I laughed before I could stop myself. Dorian stood. Not because he needed to command the room. Because somewhere along the way, he had learned that standing when someone joined you could simply mean respect. Laurel, I owe you an apology. You already gave me one. He frowned. When I looked around the restaurant. At the ordinary table. At the customers talking without lowering their voices because Dorian Vale had entered. At Martin joking with a busser near the kitchen. At the man in front of me who no longer seemed interested in making every room belong to him. When you finally stopped expecting the room to belong to you. Dorian looked down for a moment. When he met my eyes again, something in his expression was quieter than power. Dinner. One word. No cream-colored invitation. No audience. No bet. No joke. I let him wait. It seemed fair. Are you actually asking this time? Yes. And if I say no, I will drink both coffees and reconsider my personality. That could take years. I have been informed I am difficult. By reliable sources. He smiled. So, I took off my apron and folded it over the chair. Dinner. Dorian exhaled like he had been holding his breath. Tomorrow. Tonight. His eyebrows lifted. You are surprising me again. You should be used to it. We walked out together beneath the awning where so much had changed months earlier. The rain was gentle now, turning Manhattan lights into gold across the pavement. Dorian opened an umbrella, but he did not decide where we were going. He looked at me. Your choice. Such a small sentence. Once, I might not have noticed what it meant. There is a little Italian place 6 blocks from here, I said. No private room. No reservations. The tables are too close together. Sounds terrifying. You will survive. We started walking. I had once thought power was the ability to make everyone else move when you entered a room. Dorian had believed that too. We were both wrong. Real power was quieter. It was knowing when to stand your ground, when to surrender control, and when to let another person choose the road beside you. He had invited me into his world as a joke. In the end, neither of us stayed in that world. We built something better between us.